Hello, this is Nathalie Callback, and I'm here with Julie Fei-Fan Balzer, who is part of my new book, which is coming out in June, Artful Adventures in Mixed Media. And I thought it would be interesting to invite Julie to have a little chat with me. Not that we don't chat usually, but now this is official and we're recording it. So,
This is
hey,
a good
Julie.
behavior chat.
Yes, you will see us on our best behavior. Hey, Julie, how are you?
Hi.
So, Julie, tell us a little bit about yourself for those few people that might not know you.
My name is Julie Fei-Fan Balzer, and people often ask me about the Fei-Fan. That, in fact, is my middle name, and it's Chinese. My mom's Chinese, and so she gave me and my brother Chinese middle names. And I have been told that Fei-Fan translates to unique, so I'm going to take it and keep it. I like it. I think that's a good one, right? It's a lot better than Stinky Frog or something else weird that it could be. So unique, I'm going to take. And I like to make things, all kinds of things. So, like so many people, I started in one area of craft and art making and I rolled into others. So I actually really started, the first time I really started crafting by myself and buying and hoarding supplies was actually beading. I got obsessed with bead weaving. And then that kind of accidentally rolled into scrapbooking, which kind of then rolled into like card making and bookmaking, which then rolled into art journaling, which then rolled into painting, which then rolled into, I don't know what I do now. Basically, I always tell people I'm a maker. I like to make things, all kinds of things. I never met a thing I didn't like to make, except for maybe knitting. I've never really gotten to like knitting.
I did knit a lot back in the days,
Mm.
sweaters, usually without arms because that's when I lost my interest in the process. So, like the backside, I think it's called a vest or something.
Well, I used to knit scarves that went like this. Because I just kept adding stitches. So basically,
Aren't
I
these
like to
called
knit
ponchos?
triangles. I don't know what you would call those. They were Christmas trees, I guess.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm not a good knitter. I'm not a good sewer, but I know you are very good in sewing. You, in fact, you did some really amazing quilts then, right?
Yeah, actually, what I asked for when I sort of skipped over quilting, but one of the reasons I started doing so much painting was I actually started painting on fabric before I started painting on paper because I was a quilter. And I asked for a sewing machine when I graduated from college. And the first time I ever ironed, believe it or not, I grew up in a house without an iron. When something needed to be ironed, my mom was like, just hang it in the shower and pull on it. That was our ironing technique.
I
And
like it.
so I like it. I still use that technique.
Me too.
Um, so the first time I ever ironed was actually in a quilting class. I literally did not understand how an iron worked, which is hilarious. Um, but I do some sewing and stuff like that. I've always wanted to sew clothes, and I too have made some lovely sleeveless items. But yes, putting in the sleeve is definitely where I have lost interest in pursuing the project much further. But yeah, I like to make quilts, and I think the thing that I like so much about the kind of quilting that's around now is it really does incorporate all of that paint and stitch and beading, and it can take so much.
Yeah, I've seen some really cool pieces of yours. We can see a little bit of your studio right now, but I know the house you're living in is full of art everywhere, and it's very colorful and beautiful and all very different. Do you have a daily practice to create stuff?
The answer is sort of yes and no. Like, I have a rule for myself that I really try to get into my art journal for 10 minutes every day. And sometimes that's writing, sometimes that's cutting things up, sometimes that's painting. But I do try really hard to do 10 minutes of art for myself every single day. But it varies as to what it is. And it may be a run by, like the studio doors open and I grab something and do it real quick, or I'm on speakerphone with someone like my mother who gets mad when I run the heat gun when I'm on the phone with her. But anyway, and so, I've got that 10 minutes to do that. Sometimes it's like that. I mean, I, I once went to an artist talk where this woman said that this is how her day goes. in the mornings, she does computer work. And then she goes for a long walk for an hour. And then she has lunch. And then she goes into the studio and paints for the rest of the day. And then at like 5 or 6, she knocks off like it's a regular work day and spends time with her husband and all that kind of stuff. And all I could think is I was like, well, you are an amazing human being because I cannot do that. My life is so like peripatetic and I just am all over the place. And like everything that I do is done on a triage system. So it's like whatever bleeds leads. So it's like whatever deadline is closest gets the most attention. So I would say I make art every day, but not in like an organized or thoughtful way. But, I mean, I've been blogging for 10 years and it's been daily for probably 6 of those 10 years, and the question is, how do you sustain something like this? And this, it has to be a part of your life. I live this life every single day. And so what I share is my daily life. So it's not a burden in the same way that if I were to say like, my blog is about building cat sculptures. I don't know, something I don't do, whatever. Like it would be an effort. You know what I mean?
Right.
The same as like more power to fashion bloggers. Like, I mean, I put on clothes every day and I choose my clothes and Lord knows it takes me forever to pick an outfit a lot of days. And like, I love jewelry. But I could never, I mean, let's never say never, but I would surprise me if I could actually get it together to like take pretty photos of myself and talk about what I'm wearing and do all that kind of stuff. But there are people for whom that is not a burden,
right?
Who love it, who live it. And I think that's true of like every passion in your life.
Well, it's important to find something you love, right? And that's I think, why I like blogging. For me, blogging is more about, and that's what the book is about too, is like taking someone else on an artful adventure, so to speak, and show them where I draw my inspirations from, whether it be quotes or colors or things that I experienced or art strolls or, all kinds of stuff. So I think speaking of saying that everyone's path is different, what I find so interesting about our connection, besides that we might be friends or not, is like one thing that we both have in common is that we are actually not trained artists and we both had a different job when we met each other about 8 or 9 years ago, I would say, probably 9 years ago online. And
you're so old.
Just because I'm older than you don't have to rub it in. Chicken. So I think what's so interesting is that we both have seen each other going through this phase of being interested in making things and creating things and exploring things, and then trying to make it work while we're still working. And then things are just like coming up, like teaching. And actually we met each other online, but then in person, we met each other when we were both teaching in France. And some people might know that story. And we were stuck together in a room. Horrible, horrible night. But I find it so interesting that we both like kind of come from total different backgrounds, but then had a similar path in how we kind of like merged into this whole like creating, and then what are we going to do with our profession, and then we decided to leave our old profession, and now we, in different ways, but still make a living out of art. For me, it was a very hard decision to give up being a paralegal, because it meant security, earning a monthly salary, even though I had toned it down to half time at some point. It meant like health insurance, all those beautiful things that come along with a job, right? And also, you never know where your money is coming from when you do what we do, and you are not having like a real teaching job, let's say real, where you teach for good at a university too. So for me, that was a hard decision to actually let go of that security. And I will say that that still is sometimes a little bit scary to know where the next paying opportunity might come from.
So here's the thing. So first I just want to go back and say, I think that one thing that we both have in common that's really important that I just want to say is I think we are both incredibly curious. And
Nah.
well, not about
Kidding.
you, but no, I happen to think, I really believe that curiosity is the key to so much success, because it is the thing that leads you down the path of learning and finding out things and trying things and growing. And I think that when you stop being curious, you stop exploring, and so then you stop growing. And I think people are always interested in people who are curious. Like the people who fascinate me the most, the TED Talks, the
Mm-hmm.
YouTube videos, whatever it is, those are the people who were curious about something and went after it. And I love that. So that's one. Two, I mean, as far as going full time about this, I'll say two things about it, which is one, the hardest part for me about transforming into being an artist from the job I had where I was the artistic director of a theater company. The hardest transition for me is that since I was a little kid, I mean, if you read my third grade paper, it says, when I grow up, I want to run a theater company.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I had defined myself for the majority of my life as a theatrical director. And my entire identity throughout high school, college, anything. I mean, people who run into me now who I know from childhood or even from my young adulthood say to me, how's the theater going? Because that was always what I did. So for me, the hardest part was leaving behind the identity of who I thought I was. Now, at the time that I left that job, I was married to someone who made enough money that I didn't have to really think about, am I going to have health care? Am I going to have, enough food for the table? Because he was taking care of supporting me. So that was fantastic and lucky. And by the time we got divorced, which was maybe a year or two later, I had sort of figured things out enough that I was then able to make the leap to really actually supporting myself. That was not easy. It is still not easy. It is still extremely difficult and very scary. And so, but now I do pay my rent, pay my healthcare, do all that stuff through this job. And people often say like, how do you feel about your ex and all that stuff? And I always say, in the end, the thing I'm the most grateful for is I never would have had this job if he hadn't had, been able to support me through that early period of time where I needed a safety net. And I think that's extremely lucky. Now, could you do it without the safety net? Absolutely. If you had savings, if you were really brave, if you were thrifty, if you, if, I just feel like that was really lucky. And I still continue to be very lucky about that.
So speaking of your background as a theater director.
Yes. We like to call it a theatrical director.
We might have to edit my laughter out. But anyway.
I like your snorting laughter. It's so you.
So my book is a lot about inspiration and how do we take ideas and inspiration and turn that into our artwork. So what interests me, are there still things that you worked on as a theater director that somehow later pop into your mind and you kind of like embrace it and put it into your artwork? That's a weird question, maybe, but I think you get me because you know me.
It is, but it isn't. I mean, like, can I point to like a specific, I was reading Chekhov and this fell into it? No, but what I can tell you is the reason that I loved theater, the reason that I still love theater, but the reason I loved being a theatrical director so much was because I really enjoy people and I enjoy what people are saying and how do you facsimilate human emotion and how do you, tell a story through bodies and space and how do you take an audience on an emotional journey with you, an intellectual journey. How do you turn an intellectual journey into an emotional one? Those are kind of some of the strands that were interesting to me. And so I think as an artist, that's the stuff that's still interesting to me. I mean, I paint a lot of faces. I paint a lot of eyes. I do a lot of people. Because I think I'm still interested in those things. I'm just exploring them in a different way. And I think one of the things that I say all the time about my art is I'm always trying to hit that point, that magic Venn diagram thing where everything lines up in the center of the circles, where like it's visually attractive, it's emotionally, touching, and it's intellectually stimulating. And right in the center is like Picasso. And I'm just trying to like get my way right into that center area with him. But I think that all these things about like people and their stories and what people are thinking and how you can convey emotion, I think that's what I'm trying to work through now, just in a different way. Instead of, I mean, as a theatrical director, you are an artist of a kind, but your paintbrushes are people, they're actors. Your paintbrush is the set and the staging and all that kind of stuff. And this is using a different set of paints.
Speaking of theater and your paintbrushes are people, we were just, I love that. That's so cool. I have to write that down. That's beautiful. Last week, I think it was last week, we were in New York at MoMA, and part of our visit there was actually the Russian avant-garde exhibition. I forgot the real name. It was like so long that it didn't even like fit my blog title. But there were some pieces where some of the artists had done some theater stage drawings and like and that's something that you see often actually is a lot of artists that we both like like Picasso. I actually think also Clay, some other artists have done some theater costumes and stage production. Is that anything that you would ever like have an idea for? Like I could totally see you doing something like that. I mean, I know that you have to be trained for that and everything, but it's interesting that artists are interested in that.
Yeah. I mean, as a side note, I will just say that the first time I ever liked Dali's work was when there was an exhibit at MoMA and it involved some of his huge, weird stage sets. And for stage sets, his work for me just worked in such a way because I mean, his work is theatrical. But anyway, I certainly think that it's something people often ask me, like, are you ever interested in returning to the theater in any way? And I don't know. I mean, some of it, I think I found a weird way in, which is, so I recently did a shoot with my brother and I made a lot of the props and other stuff for his shoot, which was a variation on this, right? He has hanging clouds that light up. He has, stars that light up, and that's all stuff that I made. I also think that, I mean, this is something about New York and about sadly, and I mean, New York is a wonderful place, but it also has become so gentrified and artists have really been kicked out. And one of the things that they say used to happen in the days of cold water flats, is that artists lived in certain areas in really crappy experiences. And like, let's not romanticize it. It was really crappy. They're called cold water flats because you didn't have hot water. But the benefit of it is, it's a dancer living next door to a painter, living on top of a jazz musician. And so what happened there was a real cross-pollination of the arts in that time period where like you could say, hey, I'm working on a play. Will you paint the sets? And the painter would be like, yes. Where you could say, hey, that jazz music, I'm going to paint the way that sounds, and so I think like a lot of that cross-pollination, I mean, this is just like you said, I know you have to be trained for that. We're getting so specialized now. There are so few people who do like, I do this and I do that. I mean, sometimes I think people think I'm a dilettante with my career because it's not specialized, because it is all over the place. But I mean, I think in the olden days, things were even more, I mean, you remember that when you used to ride a dinosaur to school? But it was one of those things where, people were just more generalists.
Yeah, that's true.
Hey, I noticed that ring. We were in Australia when you bought that ring.
Yeah, we bought that together.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Speaking of things by artists.
Yeah, the artist was inspired by a gum tree.
Yeah, very cool.
And I think you bought your earrings on that
in
same
Australia
trip.
Too. And I think the artist was inspired by a
staying alive,
or a Christmas tree, one or the other.
So, if for the book you did this wonderful painting, which I will share in the interview, and probably Julie will share it on her blog soon too. But anyway, you did a painting which is called Long Shadow. Do you remember now? Can you tell us the story behind that piece? What were you inspired by, and what's the story of it?
So, it's a little different than the work that I normally do, which I think sometimes happens to me when I'm working on a project, like we said, for something. Like I was very conscious that this was going into a book, and it actually made me feel a little bit tight just because I suddenly was like, oh God, it's got to be good and it's got to be interesting, and it's got to be clean, and it's got to la 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 la. So, for that piece, it's actually hanging in my studio. And I look at it every day when I pass it. And, for me, it was really inspired, I think, by a desire to experiment with materials.
Mm-hmm.
So, which I know it's a love that you and I share. So I was playing around, with all kinds of like painting and hiding stuff. And I figured out that I could do the silhouette of a person. And then I figured out that I could make it larger. And then I was like, oh, that's interesting to see like the shadow of the person and the person. And is the small thing the shadow, or is the big thing the shadow? And the shadow's not black and it's not on the ground. And like, and also just questioning the idea of like, what is the impression that we leave behind, I think all that stuff is really interesting about like repeating shapes and
Mm-hmm.
what is left over, and like can you it's like that old thing with Peter Pan trying to get his shadow to stick on with soap. Such an interesting idea of a shadow where actually disassociated from your body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a beautiful piece, and it was very interesting. You can read a little bit more about it in the book. Gonna make you buy the book, right? So that's like...
I probably need to buy the book so that I can read what I wrote when I actually painted it, as opposed to, what is this, a year and a half later?
Yeah, it's it's a long process, as you know too, because you wrote a book too, which is...
I wrote a book called Carve Stamp Play, all about stamp carving, that was published like back when they had Dinosaurs, like 2 years ago.
Yeah, I remember it was like in my satchel when I was riding on the dinosaur to school. It's not that old, but yeah, so all the work is been done long in advance, and I can understand that you forgot, but I didn't. I read what you wrote. I also wanted to ask you something and put you on the spot, which you mentioned earlier, and we briefly talked about it last week, but you said you're doing a lot, and we know that, or I know that, you do a lot of like things with faces, but lately you have a real eye obsession.
I like the eyes.
Tell me a little bit why. Where's this obsession coming from?
I can't really remember exactly how it started, but I can tell you that one of the things, whenever I teach drawing faces, I always say to people, if you just get the eyes, you can do anything you want with the rest of it. And like, I'm actually looking at this very Paul Klee-like cat you have in your art journal on your table right there.
You can see that?
Oh yeah, I can. Speaking of eyes, I got a bionic vision. But what I was going to say is, I think eyes, we immediately, because we're human, look back at anything that looks like an eye, right? And if you put it, when I recently filmed the most recent season of Make It Artsy, which is my TV show on PBS, I had an apron that had an eye here, and the producer was like, "You can't wear that."
Everyone is going to look there.
Why? She's like, "Because I can't even look at your face. Like, I'm just staring at that eye." And I was like,
that was something else, maybe.
Right? I was like, it's not even that amazing an eye. It was well placed, but no. And it's like, it is this thing. We have this human interest in looking. So I think I started just doing the eyes because they fascinated me, and I wanted to play with them, and I found them interesting. And I found, like, if I wanted to create a focal point, people are always like, how do I create a focal point? How do I create a focal point? Well, you can spend years of training trying to do it, or you can just stick a flipping eye on there and it's fine, And so it's like, I just got obsessed with this eye thing. But, I recently went to Canyon Ranch, which is like a holistic spa. And I took a soul collage class there, which is something I had never heard of. But soul collage is basically about sort of like sharing your feelings and like creating collage that's not really based on like visually, this is pretty, this isn't pretty, but more on like emotionally, this resonates for me, right? And so the soul collage that I created, immediately the first image I grabbed was an eye. And then you had to write this thing about like, I am one who, right? That was based on why you picked that. So I was like, oh God, now I have to actually write about this. But actually all the stuff that I wrote made me think a little bit about why I like eyes so much. Because it was like, I am one who likes to observe. And hello, I was a theatrical director for years. That's all about observation. You know, I'm a painter now. That's all about observation. I am one who, you know, is interested in people. I am one who looks at the world. I am one who, I mean, I think that obsession is really based on a lot of who I am, which is, they say the eye is the window to the soul. I'm looking at you very deeply, Nathalie. Let's see your soul.
I think it's so interesting because I had a very terrible art school teacher later, but before that terrible art school teacher, not art school teacher, high school art teacher came in, we actually had for a year an amazing young guy who was our art teacher. And one of the first things I remember we did with him, which was like so different from anything we did before in art classes, was that he rolled out a long sheet of paper, like a construction paper, and we had like a huge room, and then he gave us what I guess it was acrylic paints, and we were supposed to just draw eyes with a big brush and just like overlapping eyes over and over. And I still actually have that. And then we went in and we would like with a frame, and we would take out the piece of eyes that we thought would be the most interesting, and we talked about it. And it like, so from the huge construction paper that you made, you got like a small, like, you know, painting, and you cut that out, and that was framed. And it was very interesting. I still have it. Maybe he was obsessed with eyes too. It's actually really fascinating. And your work reminds me a lot of this, of his classes, which, you know, we always see something different or personal, or not always, but often see something personal or stories that we ourselves experienced in the artwork of other people. So,
well, Nathalie, have you ever seen the two of us in the same room? Me and this guy? I'm just saying.
Oh, yeah, I wonder what became of him.
We might be the same person.
I don't know. You must be really old then, because back then I was riding a dinosaur to school, remember?
True.
Okay, so that was really interesting, and it was a different chat than we usually have. I wanted to wrap it up. It was awesome to have you, but I wanted to know, what are you doing right now? Is there anything that's coming up for you? Classes, books, a piece of artwork you're working on? Shoot it now.
So I have a new class coming up, all about designing stamps that create repeating patterns. It's going to be a good one. And it goes beyond the stuff that's in my book, which is kind of exciting, to some new stuff that I figured out and learned. So I'm excited to share all of that. So that starts, at the end of the month, March 31st.
It's an online class?
It's an online class. I also have some in-person classes coming up. I'm teaching in Montreal at Scrapbook Central. I am teaching at the Ink Pad in New York City this summer. But yeah, so lots of good stuff. I'm going to the Museum of Fine Arts today here in Boston. I'm going to hear a lecture on Matisse, and then I'm going to look around the museum, and then I'm going to a panel in the evening on collecting. So I'm actually staying at the museum for like 8 hours.
That's not the one that I thought you would tell us. You have something else. Can you talk about it? You told me like a big thing.
Oh, for the first time, I totally forgot about it. I have some artwork in a juried art exhibit, which is really exciting. Yeah, it's one of my rotating repeat stamps. So that's at the Mosesian Art Center. It opens 2 weeks from now, and I think it's open through maybe into May, I believe. I'll post all the information on my blog and my website, which is balzerdesigns.com. That's where you can find me.
It was lovely to have you. Thank you, Julie. And yeah, bye-bye.
Bye.